Oh,
Thank you very much. So again, a warm welcome on the first probably warm afternoon of the year, and I'm sorry that you have to spend it in this Zoom meeting. It's 2 o'clock on Friday the 28th of May, and this is the 17th meeting of the Sleaford Neighbourhood Plan Working Group. My name is Councillor Robert Oates, and I'm chairing the Neighbourhood Plan Working Group and chairing this meeting today. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Sleaford Town Council website for the public to view. Could I ask Nicola now for any apologies that have been sent in? Thank you.
yeah, we've had apologies from Kathy Blythe. That's it.
Kathy Blythe, thank you very much. So let's move swiftly on to the next item, which is the note of the last meeting on the 14th of May. I hope everybody received the note along with the other papers and had a chance to look through it. For trying to make up some time in the meeting today, I don't propose to go through this at length, as we usually do, page by page. We look at the note of the last meeting for accuracy purposes only. So could I ask if anybody has any comments or corrections to make on the note of the last meeting? If so, could you please put your hand up, either on the participants list on the side of the screen, or wave at me. I don't see any hands going up, so I think we can accept that as approval of the note of the last meeting. Thank you very much, which means we can move swiftly on to actions arising from this note. Could I ask you, Nicola, to take us through those actions, please?
Yeah, I think we're there with all of them. Obviously posting the minutes up under point 2, that's all has been done after approval and will be done after this one. We've got, sorry, I've got them on my screen. Any additional comments on the report from Community Links? We've had some from the People's Panel, and Janet's incorporated those into the revised version, which I subsequently sent out. Under 4.2, we're not at the stage yet where we've done those actions yet, but we'll be discussing those later in the meeting. The walking tour, the draft proposal has been circulated. It's under 5.1, and we did adjust the dates, I think, didn't we? We'll confirm all those at the end. But obviously, we're all here today, so it worked, and that was it.
Thank you very much, Nicola. On the note of the last meeting under 5.1, there were 2 actions, both for me. One was to circulate the draft proposal for the walking tours with the public, which I have now done, and it's on the agenda for this meeting. In that same short paper, I make a mention to walking tours with school students, which we hope to arrange also. And the action from the last meeting was me to send a draft proposal to Nick for those school walking tours. I'm afraid I haven't got much further than the paragraph which is in the paper we've had today, but I will, Nick, because I know that you have to leave at 3, in case we don't get this far by 3 o'clock. I will send you a longer draft proposal this week, which hopefully you can discuss with the other heads and the other teachers at the school, so that we can take that action forward. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, I mean, just to let you know as well, we've also had another contact from the, I think, the Civic Society about the Castle site as well. I don't know if David Marriage is involved with that. It came from Gary Titmus. Also, is that a different work stream, David, do you think?
Well, it's linked in, but we could pull him in as someone. Simon knows most about the site. Gary's more project administrator more than anything else, but we could pull him in out of courtesy, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. He's written to both me and Joe Smith, the heads, about that, because obviously the Castle site is very close to the Stephen Sleaford High School. the other school that I run. So there's issues about that. So I thought it'd be quite a good thing. It's very close to this girls' school, so I'm sure they'll get involved with it.
Yeah, leave that with me, Nick. It's a good
Okay.
idea. I'll take that on board.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. So those are the actions from the last meeting, which means we can move swiftly on with the actions for this meeting. Item 4 is for Janet to give us a presentation on her report of the findings from our stage 1, the engagement with the public activities. So Janet, could I ask you to give that presentation, and if anybody has any questions, I'm sure you will have for Janet, questions and comments, hold them until the end. And then also after Janet's presentation, Steve Kemp has suggested that to help us make up some time in the process and make the best use of today, that we amend the agenda slightly or add in another item actually, which is following Janet's presentation, to not only have a discussion about the phase 1 engagement strategy, but also to have a first quick discussion about the next step beyond that, which is actually the very final part of the phase 1, which is developing a vision and objectives out of what the public have told us. So Steve, would you like to say a little bit more about that before we proceed any further?
Yes, thank you, Gaz. Yeah, I think it'd be helpful as we just said, because we sort of need to be moving things along, and we will fairly soon now be getting to the point where we are asking the community generally for more input into the plan making process. I think it would be helpful to have at least the makings or the start of a vision and some objectives based on the analysis that, based on your consideration of the analysis that Janet's going to be going through with us in the first part of the afternoon's meeting, so that when we then go to the broader community asking for their input to the vision, they don't have to start completely from scratch. So I think it's a lot easier for people if they've got at least some idea of what a vision might be, what the basic components of it might be, to comment on and to build upon, rather than just saying, okay, what do you think? What's your vision for Sleaford? Which I think for a lot of people that's quite a daunting prospect. Whereas commenting on something that the group's already had an initial stab at is a lot easier.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I hope most of the working group agree with that analysis by Steve, that when engaging with the public, it's easier to do so if there is at least a skeleton of something on the table to put to them so that they can comment and amend in their own way, rather than asking them to sit down with a blank sheet of paper and put down their own vision and objectives. However, we will make a bit of a start on it today, at least get some elements of it down, hopefully, and then have a look at it, and then review whether it is actually a suitable piece of material to use, particularly in the workshop which we have planned towards the end of June. 29th of June, I believe, is the date. We have a workshop planned with the public. So given that our next meeting is very, very close to that date, it made sense to develop at least a draft vision and objectives out of today's meeting. So I hope that's okay with everyone. So without further ado, can I ask Janet to give us her presentation, please?
Right, well, first thing I'm going to do is try and share my screen. I have got a backup because Nicola also has a copy, so hopefully we've got all the bib and braces sort of connected. So let me just see if I can share. Oh, it looks like I'm going to be able to. So bear with me while I just find this presentation. Right, can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. Okay, so firstly, good afternoon, everyone.
Do you want to put it on screen?
Sorry?
Do you want to put it in the view?
Yes, I will be. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Bit small.
So,
Slideshow. Yeah.
is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to do that. Okay. So, the purpose of this presentation is not really to go through the report, which was some 47 pages, page by page, as though you've all had a copy. And also, I sent through all the appendices, which is the raw data as well. So you'll have that. This is really an overview of the analysis. So what I'm including in this presentation is really what was the purpose of the questionnaires that we sent out, how this consultation that we've just done, the questionnaires, fits into the neighbourhood plan roadmap. I think that's quite timely because it will show where the vision and objectives also fit in. A summary of the analysis, what the next steps are, and then questions from yourselves. So, the purpose of the questionnaires. Really, the idea behind the questionnaires was to gain an understanding of the community's views around Sleaford. So looking at identifying their opinion, their aspirations of the community, and to use that information that we gather into building the evidence base. So as I mentioned here, through identifying the issues and the themes that we have done, this will help to support the formation of a vision and objectives, which is the next thing that we're looking at. The vision and objectives underpin any policies and the content of the final plan. And the other sort of main reason for doing the questionnaires was to involve the community in the process, to give them a real sense of ownership. At the end of the day, the neighbourhood plan is a community plan. And this was one way of engaging the community. Normally, we probably wouldn't have done the baseline and the follow-up questionnaire. We would have tried to have run a series of engagement activities. We've not been able to do that. So this is why we used the questionnaire. I think it's the start of the engagement process. It certainly isn't the only opportunity that the community will have to get involved. We're already talking about the profiling, having the sort of follow-up event, the profiling. There are also stages where it's a statutory requirement to involve the community, which is at the draft plan stage. And I'll sort of show you on my little map in a minute. Really, we're wanting to do all of this and to keep the community really involved, to get buy-in at the referendum. There's a lot of work that you're all involved in sort of getting the plan together. And what we wouldn't want to see is a disappointing return at the referendum. And also, hopefully, people can realise that the plan is taken into account the aspirations and comments of the community. What this consultation doesn't do, it's not something that's actually examined by the examiner. It would form part of the consultation statement. That would be something that you would deliver as part of the final document, or consultation summary, however you want to look at it. Really doing this type of work is best practice. So this is the consultation, this is the roadmap for neighbourhood planning. And I've put an arrow on here to show really where we are, which is the community engagement involvement. So, you know, we've done the publicity, we've tried to engage local people, engage local partners, hence the working group. We've done the initial community engagement, which is what we're doing now, and we're going to be providing feedback. The next step in the roadmap is the themes. the vision and objectives, which is the next bit that we'll be doing. And then from then on, the building the evidence base, etc., is where Open Plan will be guiding you through the final stages. So I'm hoping that roadmap sort of gives a clear indication of where we are. You might think, crikey, we're not that far on, but actually, given the sort of circumstances in which we've been working, I think there's been some really good work done and some great levels of consultation. So I think give yourselves a pat on the back for that. So what I'm doing is a summary of the analysis. So firstly, what we did this time round, we undertook 2 questionnaires, one for households, and there were 519 completed questionnaires returned, and a business questionnaire, which resulted in 26 completed questionnaires. I'm going to look at the household questionnaire initially. We used the thematic areas that we used for developing the questionnaire were really taken from the baseline questionnaire that we did. So that is, we looked at community safety, the environment and Sleaford heritage, highways and transport and parking, housing development, leisure and arts, the local economy, and accessibility. The analysis showed that all age groups were represented. However, this was looking at the respondents' household makeup. So, and these are the average percentages for the people that were represented in the survey. Now, I think the response rate shows quite a reasonable range of age ranges, better than I think some of the most recent questionnaires that I've been involved with, and Steve, I certainly know, generally we would probably find the average age group is 65 plus. Well, we've not had that this time, although there is a clear pattern that the single biggest age group was 42.5%. So reasonably good response rate. And looking at the association with the town, over 80% have lived in Sleaford for over 6 years. Now, when I move on to the next, I'm now going to look at each of the areas and just give the sort of main salient points. I'm also putting some comments. Now, these are my comments, and they're just ideas about how this analysis can be used moving forward, both in terms of planning policy, but also looking at potential projects that might come out of these surveys, but they are just my thoughts. So firstly, community safety. So the first part of this, it shows that the majority of respondents say they feel safe. The direct experience of antisocial behaviour from respondents was around 15%. There were mainly minor examples of antisocial behaviour, such as sort of verbal abuse, feeling slightly intimidated, you know, boy racers, that type of activity. A few experiences of neighbourhood abuse. Fortunately, very little sort of physical abuse. Feeling unsafe in specific areas. There were sort of 362 responses recorded from people who say they do feel it unsafe at certain times and in certain areas of Sleaford. Naturally, a lot of those were connected with at night time and unlit areas, alleyways, where people are drinking alcohol outside of public houses and in car parks. We use the community safety theme because Carrs Grammar School pupils undertook a survey which they designed themselves and sent us through the results. And there was a lot of young people saying that there were certain areas of the town that they felt unsafe. So we wanted to explore it a little bit further. So these were the sort of main results that came out from that. So my comments here are that we should be considering how planning policies developed as part of the neighbourhood plan can support safer communities. So that's part of the evidence building. You know, when we're building new roads, when we're building new paths, how can we make them safe? How can people feel safe when they walk along them? In terms of non-planning actions, it could be, again, as I said, these are just my thoughts, include working with pubs to ensure public safety, looking at public awareness regarding keeping safe, and promoting things like Neighbourhood Watch. Next thematic area, the environment and Sleaford's heritage. What the analysis enabled us to do was to identify the respondents' key priorities for action, what they felt were most important to them, and they were related to sort of visual improvements in the town. Reduction in waste and litter, a very high response rate to that. To enhance and protect the green spaces. I mean, all through the questionnaires, there's a lot of referral to the importance of green spaces and the green spaces that Sleaford currently has. And also environmental improvements to the River Slee. They were the three key areas of action that people felt were most important. Again, the comment, the neighbourhood profiling that was going to be undertaken, the green space assessment that will be undertaken as part of the evidence base, will be important in mapping green spaces and the heritage assets in the town as part of building the evidence base. Non-planning actions that could be something that were considered could include things like community litter picking, perhaps involving the schools, take your waste home campaign. Again, these are, as I've mentioned, are just ideas. Highways, transport and parking. What we really wanted to do here was just build on the comments that we received from the baseline survey, where obviously concerns over parking and traffic congestion were very key. And again, those threads run through this survey and the survey that was undertaken with businesses. So congestion and car parking are long-standing issues. We wanted to further explore those, looking at perhaps, you know, how people get around. Public transport is very low. Only 1.6% of responders actually use public transport for getting around the town, and only 6.2% of respondents use public transport for travelling out of Sleaford. Majority of people use their car. In town, it was pleasing to see that a lot of people also walk. There's really good support for actions that could improve the opportunity to walk and cycle. A real keenness around walking and cycling, particularly sort of how additional paths and cycleways could be developed in some of the new development areas, the housing development areas of the town that could link to the town centre, and also around upgrading of existing paths and cycleways. My comment here was there is an opportunity for this plan to develop policies that will support the reduction in car usage. Non-planning actions could include campaigns, incentives that encourage walking, cycling. Moving on to housing and development. What we weren't doing here was really looking at the number of houses that are required in Sleaford. The allocation of housing has been mostly determined by the Central Lincolnshire Plan. The purpose of the questionnaire was to identify respondents' views on certain issues around housing and development. So, housing types. We wanted to explore what type of housing people thought was most required. There was a high level of support, quite interestingly, for bungalows as well as houses in the town. The size of dwelling was relatively evenly weighted for both smaller, sort of under 3-bed and over three-bedroom properties. No real distinction there. However, there was a real support for actions that will help to mitigate climate change in terms of looking at the design of properties and the construction, using sustainable, energy efficient design, and also in terms of building considerations, there was certainly support for appropriate investment in infrastructure. I think one of the concerns that sort of runs through people sort of not so opposed to housing, but more concerned about the additional facilities that will be provided to account for the additional housing, and also looking at the sort of infrastructure and how that will develop to sort of manage and soak up the additional rise in population. Ensuring adequate parking, as I said, and services are provided to offset the increase in dwellings and population. One of the key things that people have the biggest concern around. Not a big anti-development message coming through at all. Although the need for houses on the open market received the highest percentage return, there was an open comments box, and some respondents showed support for affordable housing. Now, I know one of the questions that came through from the working group was about the definition of affordable housing and social housing. Well, when we undertake things like housing needs surveys, we use the term affordable to include social housing as well. This is the definition that really comes from the National Planning Policy Framework. So I'm not going to read it out, but it was put onto the questionnaire as well. So it shows that we're talking about affordable housing, whether that is open market housing or whether that is housing that's provided by a housing association or local authority. And moving on, leisure and arts. Again, the importance of open spaces was again illustrated in this section of the questionnaire, the analysis, sorry. Respondents were also very supportive of improvements to and provision of, if possible, more open spaces and play facilities. There was also a continued support for a cinema in the town that was recorded. They were the key sort of points that came through from this section of the survey. My comments here relate to the neighbourhood profiling, again, green space assessment, which will definitely be an important part of the evidence base in identifying any potential new open spaces that could be mapped and included in the plan. The town council, I know, are responsible for a lot of the play facilities in the town, so it should be looking at addressing any potential improvements there. And the cinema development, although I know it's outside of the remit of this working group, but looking at progress or otherwise of the cinema development should be publicised so that the local community are aware of what is or isn't happening around the development of that potential sort of asset for the town. The local economy, this was really looking at Sleaford town centre and what's actually available. So the key points that came out were that there is definitely support for improvements to Sleaford street scene as a way of making the town more attractive. I think in the last survey, people were sort of quite concerned about the precinct area where we used to have a bandstand and how open and empty it looked. Also, sort of the frontage of a lot of shops looking quite drab and not attractive when you drive up through the main street of Sleaford. So that had the highest weighted average response. Attracting more visitors through improvements to Sleaford's cafe culture was the second highest weighted average. There've been a number of respondents who, have commented on the fact that there are more eating places and that it's quite nice to see the open areas in the marketplace. That's been mentioned by a number of people. Real concern over empty shops. I know in the last survey, we have people saying, oh, we'd like to see more shops in operation again, bringing in sort of, some of the big store names. This group and this neighbourhood plan doesn't have any sort of control over who has a shop or what types of shops are going to be in the town. But I think given the current climate and when we look at the sort of rise in online shopping that certainly happened because of the pandemic, then we're not going to return to the type of high streets that people used to see. And so there was and is some support for looking at whether empty shops could be granted change of use, and that was given the third highest weighted average. Access to affordable parking was a key strand of the baseline questionnaire, and although we didn't ask too much more about it in this survey, there was a significant number of comments in support of more affordable parking, and certainly in the business questionnaire that I'll go on to, where they feel that the issues around parking are really impact on their local businesses. Non-planning actions here could include external painting of empty shops and floral displays. As I mentioned, the precinct's lack of character was commented on in the baseline survey as in need of attention. We included an accessibility section in this survey because we really wanted to understand people that maybe have accessibility issues, whatever they might be, and what problems they may experience in getting around Sleaford and being involved in the sort of facilities and activities that Sleaford provides. So this part of the questionnaire was completed by just nearly 58% of all respondents. The barriers that were encountered by respondents or family members included the uneven roads and pavements, narrow pavements and doorways, and certainly feeling unsafe when crossing the roads in the town. Required improvements to facilities, for example, access to shops and public toilets, were things like pavements and curbs were seen as important in improving accessibility. Comment here was about how we can look at engaging disability groups in develop of the neighbourhood planning policies. I think it's important to get that perspective. Right, moving on, the business questionnaire, the response rate was low. I would say that along with engaging young people, businesses are equally challenging. And I think given COVID, I think that might have added, been a contributing factor. We weren't able to sort of leaflet drop. We heavily relied on publicity through Facebook and through using MK and the Chamber to engage businesses in participating in this survey. And I would imagine that for a lot, they were very busy, probably firefighting with their businesses to keep them afloat, hence quite a low response rate. However, we did get a cross-sector of businesses represented, so we have got views to consider and use in further consultation as we go forward. So some of the main points from this survey: over 40% of the respondents operate their business from the town centre. 3 of the respondents indicated they were not actually based in the town, but use the town for services. 80% plus of the respondents were either the owner, a director, or a partner of the business. 81% were a limited company or a sole trader. Over 50% have been operating as a business in Sleaford for 6 years or more. Only 2 of the respondents indicated that they employed more than 25 staff. COVID has impacted on 88% of business respondents, and that's what they told us. 44% of those said the impact was significant. And I think it was around 4 had to make some redundancies. However, on a more positive note, 44% were already seeing a brighter future for their business. The improvements that people would like to see, or businesses would like to see, were an increased business space to support their expansion. That was just over 1/3 of businesses felt that that's something that they required. 40% would like to see affordable meeting rooms, training facilities, and startup business units. Infrastructure improvements were also mentioned: broadband, mobile phone, electricity supply, people felt was quite important. A lack of skilled workforce was another area that businesses felt there was a lack of skilled workforce, and opportunities for business networking was something else that people felt were important and would be advantageous. There were some improvements that were shared with household respondents, and these were initially around the improved parking facilities. So 15 businesses indicated that parking in the town is not adequate, and 75% consider that free parking to be an important facility for their business and attracting people to come into town rather than going elsewhere. There's also support for a lowering of business rates, and also around the availability of suitable business premises. And businesses also felt that the empty shops were not attracting visitors and customers into the town. On the selling points, we did ask business respondents to tell us what they thought were the selling points for Sleaford. So growth of the town was a selling point of 70% of respondents. Obviously, the more people, hopefully the more customers. The fact that Sleaford has a low crime level, people felt that Sleaford is an attractive town to live and work in, and also a good quality of schools, and generally a good quality of life. So that's sort of a quick overview of the main points of both surveys. I wanted to now sort of put that into sort of where we go, next steps, what we do with the responses. So obviously feedback is important. I know that the report has already been put onto the neighbourhood plan website, but also perhaps salient points through media. And now that we're looking at a visioning event, it'll be a great opportunity to give people the opportunity to read the main points of the report. Obviously, developing of the vision and objectives, using the thematic areas that I've pointed out through this presentation. Then it will be building on the evidence base. There will be the next sort of steps in the process of developing the plan. We'll then be moving on to preparation of the draft plan. And I'm just sort of going to mention here how important continued engagement is. It's important throughout, but a legal requirement at the draft plan stage. You would then be looking at submitting the plan to NKDC for further consultation, examination, referendum, another key point, and then hopefully the plan is made. So still quite a long way to go, but hopefully we can now start to move more at pace as a society, we start to open up a little bit more. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of my presentation. Whoop.
Thank you very much, Janet. That was, I think, very useful, the way that you...
I hope that was okay. I just wanted to make, I thought, well, you've had a big report. I didn't want to spend too long sort of going over what's a full report.
Oh, no.
More about putting it into context and showing how this is to be used. You know, some communities have done very, very short questionnaires, you know, maybe 5-10 questions, and then relied heavily on events to sort of gather further information. We've not really been able to do that to date. So that's why this questionnaire was used, but it isn't actually a piece of evidence in itself. I'm right in saying that, aren't I, Steve? It is much more about, you know, gathering those initial ideas so that we can develop on those, certainly the visioning.
It's evidence of community feelings and opinions.
Yes, yeah. But it isn't actually, you know, the percentage, we don't need to get hung up too much on the number of people that responded, because the examiners won't be looking at that.
No, personally, I think that was a really good presentation, Janet. As you said, the details are in the report. What you've done is pull out for us the main thematic areas that people have so far responded on, which I think those give us really useful building blocks to develop the objectives for the plan. So personally, I think that was a good way of doing it. It gives us a step forward that we can develop in the meeting today in the way that we said earlier, that we would try to pull some objectives out of what you're telling us today. But before we go any further forward, are there any questions to Janet so far? Nick has put his hand up quickly first, and then David Marriage, and then David Souter.
Okay, well, thanks, Janet. I thought it was really useful, that presentation. It ties a lot of things that I hear from my students about what's going around town. The one thing I think I'd like to ask the question was much raised about the issue of school transport around town and the use of the marketplace and Gregson Green, because that's an issue that we as three secondary heads are talking a lot with the local, well, about Lincolnshire County Council at the moment and the suppliers. We know that with 3 schools, we're getting slated on Facebook at the moment in different Sleaford Neighbourhood groups. And we're having regular meetings now with people higher up than us to try and work that out. I just wonder if that's something that's been dragged out or put in the questionnaires that they've raised. The shop owners, for example, who have given myself and my other 2 secondary heads quite a hard time. Some of the localities, some of the local burgers of the town are doing the same. I just wonder if that's something that's been raised for the questionnaires at all.
It was raised in the baseline questionnaire, right, Nick, yeah, which we responded back on, and Gregson Green was one of those areas. Yes, certainly in terms of where young people are concentrated, you know, the sort of end of the day in the marketplace, Gregson Green, not very much by shop owners, but the response rate from shop owners to the survey was really, really poor. But yes, it has been raised. It wasn't put again into this survey because we'd already had it sort of raised the first time round, and we've got a whole selection of comments from people about transport into town, you know, where the school buses drop children off and where they pick them up. I think there's been a long-standing issue, hasn't it, for many years.
Yeah. Just let the group know what's happening on that one. There has been a Lincolnshire County Council review of transport, which some people might be aware of, them might not. that they Lincolnshire County Council got a consultancy company called Edge to do that, and I was part of that. So in my comments, there's going to be launched a Sleaford transport review as well, school transport review as well, which I think I will keep this group apprised of, because I'm part, again, my 3 schools are all part of that. It's very important to get this right. And Gregson Green is one of the key areas, really, because Gregson Green is where you might have anything up to 300 students there between 3:30 and 4:15. That's one area. The other area, of course, the marketplace, which is really unsafe now because of the decision to create a cafe culture, which I applaud. It makes the town look so much better. But it's not helpful between 3:30 and 4:30 when you've got no car parking is full, and you've got there's lack of safety basically there. And so everyone's aware, we have, and I'll this made quite public, we have no legal jurisdiction as schools once they're outside our school gate. And I think people in Sleaford seem to forget that. They think we should be putting our staff out there between 3:30 and 4:30. And we can't do it. That's why I asked the question about transport, where it came from, because I think the cafe culture is great. I think that's a really good thing for the town. And I know that students would use that in their free periods, which, will help the industry. But also we need to be working with the good local citizens of Sleaford, all these issues together, so they're all joined up.
Yeah, we've got lots of comments from the baseline survey about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Before I move on to David Marriage, I just want to mention 2 points myself, which directly arise out of what Nick has said. One of them is that separately comments have been made to me about how in the past the school buses used to collect the school children from the area around the train station. There's a very large area, very large parking areas there, which are very often unused, and they're away from the town centre. It didn't bother anyone else that all the school children congregated down there while they were waiting for their buses to turn up. So I was slightly surprised that that didn't come up in any of the responses to the questionnaire. I don't know, Nick, whether it's something that's already come up in your review. Anybody is?
Certainly, it's interesting you mentioned that area, Robert, because I had a meeting with one of the chief commercial providers this morning, being, again, the 3 heads, we met with them. And we talked about Station Road as one of the areas. We also talked about NKDC, because you're probably aware that NKDC offices are hardly being used, and their car park's probably about a quarter of a fifth full. And there's no intention of NKD offices going back for a long period of time. So that's another area we could move away from Gregson Green. So we're looking into that as well. Of course, that will need collusion with NKDC, who might want to not do that space, which is quite frankly being left empty. You talk about Janet's talked about car parking as well there. There isn't a lot of car parking in town. Most people will park at Tesco's during holiday times and weekends, or park at Carl's Grammar School. Yeah, because they're places they can park, and we don't mind that. I mean, that's what we give back to the community in that sense. So Station Road is definitely one area we're looking at as well, with the local company, Sleafordian, and also NKDC is another area, their car park. But I've not broached that with Mark Stewart yet, who's in charge of that area.
Okay.
There's a very underused car park on Grantham Road.
Which one's that?
Near the Elite Fish and Chip Shop.
Yes.
It's hardly, I mean, it was a great idea to put a car park, but it's because of where it is, it's quite isolated. I think a lot of people don't like to park there. Buses could maybe use it.
The argument, of course, will be that you're moving a problem from Gregson Green because you've got loud voices there, and I won't name those, that wouldn't be right, but you move those to somewhere else, and therefore you get loud voices elsewhere in the town. It's an ongoing problem. I've been ahead now 14 years in town, and every year we have this discussion, and we've never actually moved away from it, unfortunately. And also you have to think also about the buses, that you've got 3 schools involved, and you've got about 1,000 young people going on buses between 3:30 and 4. You've got 2,500 other people walking around town. It's very difficult, and you got to, wherever you put the buses, you all think about safety and how long people hang around. So there's a lot of issues intertwined here.
And just briefly related to that, on the question of schools, I was also surprised that we didn't get anybody commenting on the plan to move the high schools out of the town to a new site on the edge of town.
We didn't really ask the question.
We didn't really ask that question, but when we tried to ask people really open questions, not only in the surveys, but when we spoke to people in the stall on the Market Square, for example, what do you generally feel about the town? What things do you think would improve it? As I understand it, the the proposal to move the high schools to a new site on the edge of town, it will do very many things, including taking away this congestion problem and this noise and children congregating. And so I was surprised that that plan has not yet surfaced in our engagement activities. So I'm kind of hinting here to Nick that if there is a parents association or a school group or individuals within the school who wish to express their support for that move out of the town, if they approach us about that, then it would be something that we would include in the neighbourhood plan.
Okay, well, on that point, just as a group aware, we've got a ministerial visit next month. Nick Gibb, who's Minister for Schools, is coming to visit my schools, both my schools, and look at the new site. And we will know then as to whether this is an absolute goer or not. So I would say next time we meet, which I think is the end of June, I'll be able to let you know what's happened on that front. And the business case has been written, been submitted. Obviously, I was part of one of the ones that wrote the business case. And you are right, Rob, but it's all about regenerating the town. It's helping to regenerate the town, looking at transport links, looking at how we can actually improve things around, congestion moves out of town. When we first moved to the idea back in 2012-13, and we went out to local shop owners, they were against it. They were gassed because it meant all the young people are moving away from their shops. But now they're actually quite pleased that we're moving away from the shops. So yeah, you get what you wish for, don't you, sometimes? And we're going to go ahead with the plans. And if we can get the funding from the government for this plan, the Sleaford Grammar School, then we will go ahead. But our meeting on the 17th of June is about that, really.
Good, excellent. So, right, I will stop there because David Marriage and David Suter have been very patient. David Marriage, you were next to speak.
Right, mine's more of an administrative one than anything else. Janet, very good presentation. Thank you very much. One of your early slides, was either slide 2 or slide 3, showed the route map, your plan. It may just help if it's possible to put some envisaged dates on that. Things have gone very well to date. And people are going to say, well, okay, we're here, but where do we go and what's some guidance dates towards the future? Even if you call them target dates, it would make the people buy into it to see how well we've done up until now and how long it would be before something actually is completed.
That information actually, David, is on the neighbourhood plan website. There's a step-by-step.
Well, I know that, but I haven't got a computer in my pocket to keep looking at the neighbourhood plan website. It would be very nice on your presentation just to put that on that slide if it were possible.
We can look at that for a public event.
Yeah, for a public event, not this one. A public event. I mean,
yeah, no problem.
And
Point noted.
I'm glad you mentioned that, David, because of course, since that timetable was last put up on the website, things have moved on. Things have changed. We've had more delays with the elections that were held, etc. So we are another month or so behind on that timetable. So this will be an opportunity to update that timetable and make it more accurate.
Yeah, and there's no reason why we can't just lift that off and have it in a presentation for the event at the end of June.
Great.
That's
Thanks
it.
very much.
Thank you, David.
David Suter was next, and then Ken.
Yes, I'm looking at the responses to question 3 and where people feel unsafe. First of all, Nag's Head Passage is a lot more than the piece where you cut through to the station. It goes all the way through to Castle Causeway, and people often use it as a shortcut. I must say I would never use that at night. And I'm not quite sure how we use this information. So if one wanted to cut through to the station, I could imagine that as wanting to light it up and encourage people to use that route. But if we encourage people to go along route to Castle Causeway, we could be encouraging people to go into unsafe area. So I'm just wondering how we use it and to get potential improvements. For example, on occasion I've used an alleyway near St Dennis Church, and I feel safe using it both day and night, but probably some lighting at night would improve it. So what I'm concerned is how we can practically use this information, and whether it was segmented between day and night when people felt safe. And as far as the recreation ground, I feel completely safe in the recreation ground, but I'll never go for the recreation ground in the middle of the night, going through a large open space that's unlit. And so, it's how we use it practically. But I do see some very positive things coming out of this, like the climate emergency being important. And I think I do feel that we need to look at some of these responses on how we fulfill that priority of people in Sleaford.
Well, I think, David, at this stage, we're not really looking at how we're necessarily going to, what we're going to do exactly with it. It's just those initial thoughts. I mean, the profiling, the walk around, that will be a good opportunity to really sort of look at those areas and see what potentially could be improved to make them safer. I mean, we should always be looking at how we make places more safe, but also it's about the education, like you say, about what we can all do to have a responsibility for our own safety as well. So, I mean, these are just thoughts, these are just comments from people. I mean, some people feel perfectly safe wherever they are. I mean, there were a few people that say they don't ever feel safe. I mean, that was really sad. When you get people saying, I don't feel safe in the day or at night in Sleaford, and that's not great. I think some of them are perceptions as well. I mean, there was a big debate, wasn't there, when we looked at street lights being turned off, people at night, and people were absolutely horrified. And it's going to see an increase in burglaries. There'll be more sort of violent crime, etc. None of that has been proven, and I went to several presentations where actually the opposite was shown, that not having so many lights actually can make places safer, particularly in terms of burglaries, etc. But we can't dismiss people's views, and if we have people feeling unsafe, and certainly know that some of the students that commented very early on felt unsafe in certain areas of the town, and one of those was the little walkway up the side of St Dennis Church, up past our building, where they felt intimidated, because you often see people hanging around there. And I know the Nag's Head Passage has been one of those areas for as long as I can remember, and I've lived in the area a long time now, that has been one of those areas that people don't particularly feel safe. I'm walking across car parks where youths, etc. are. So all we're doing is trying to bring in that information together. And I think as you move on with the plan and you start to sort of map Sleaford, that's when you can start to look at what potentially can be done. And I suppose, bringing Steve in here, when you're looking at planning in the future around safer communities, when you're planning footpaths, etc., it's about making them safe, isn't it? And providing areas that aren't lending themselves to where people can feel vulnerable.
Yeah. There's sort of two sides to it. One is about recognising where there are concerns at the moment and thinking about how you can address those now. And the other is making sure that the new places that emerge are designed with safety in mind, so they learn the lessons from the places that are causing concern at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you. Is that okay, David? Sorry, is that okay? Councillor Souter.
Yes, that's okay for the moment.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next was Ken.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right now?
Yes.
Is it a bit better?
Thank you.
Good. First of all, quite a few of what came in the report is covered under the Manual of Streets 2007, which needs to be implemented and enforced by our development plan, because it hasn't been enforced for a long time. You went on to say green spaces. Sleaford is actually down 50% on green spaces, because people keep on thinking that the farmland is a green space. In actual fact, it is industrial space, and they use chemicals, insecticides and herbicides on them, which even if the dog's paw goes on it, it'll go, and it's a cumulative poisoning. It'll kill dogs, children without any protection or anything like that. And it's that severe. And especially the new, the ones that have been banned but have been brought back, the ones that kills the bees, kills humans as well. So we cannot consider farmland as green space as it used to be decided on. That goes for that one. Frontage and everything like that is actually NKDC and business. The lack of skilled workforce, you said, is really because we haven't got a college. If we had a college, this could be redressed quite easily. That's why Boston has got a college. That's why Grantham has got a college. They have got what's the name? Deficiencies, but at least when they have that deficiency, they can get the college to put up a course and get it done that way. Because if it's linked to, say, Lincoln University, Nottingham University, we could have our own seminars like Zoom with what's the name, with a TA in there to help any of the students, and that could be done. Shopping, turning shops into housing. The only way to do that and keep the parking is to make sure that the bottom floor, which is a shop, turns into a parking space. So you can use the upper stories as housing, unless we're going to start doing the other thing of putting extra parking in Sleaford. And I put forward a long time ago that's in North Kesteven District Council car park, or is County Council car park, we could have a multi-story car park there. The two bottom floors could be the multi-story car park, and the top two can be offices. And you could do that all the way around. And also all the land behind it, we've all got those cabins that are going to be destroyed. That could be another area for parking of buses and things like that. Let's go to the last point. Oh, yes. All our points, I think, should be started to be segregated to who is responsible or who can do the actual changes. Because Sleaford Town Council or the council itself will not be able to do quite a few of these changes. But if you segregate them into the district council and the county council, hopefully they will pick up that these have been requested by the people, and therefore, or even including business as a different rating, so that each of these different departments know what they can do to change Sleaford, or help do a coordinated change with Sleaford. Thank you.
Yes, Ken, on that last point, the neighbourhood plan itself will include a whole range of written policies that we will suggest based on the comments made by the public of what they want and our analysis of how to make those changes happen. We will write a series of policies, and as you say, some of those policies will be aimed at the town council, many of them will be aimed at the district council, some of them at the county council, and some of them at other organisations like the bus operators or the train operators, etc. So all of the actions in the plan where action needs to be taken by a particular body or group of bodies, we will be writing policies to steer them towards that action. So next to speak was Keith.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. That was really helpful. I thought that was good. I just wonder where we are in terms of things that are already happening and are in the pipeline, as opposed to things that people will see. And we're talking about for the future. Picking up on what Nick was talking about in terms of the schools, and I was one of those 50 years ago boys who went from cars down to the station road. And it's not just about where they congregate, it was actually moving from one place to the other and some of the dangers and things associated with all that. So I understand there's a big problem. But we also mentioned the green spaces, and there is already a plan for the Slee, east-west inland, with something happening in Grantham as well. And there's a risk that we're asking people to comment on things which are already in the process of or being moved forward that they may not be aware of. And I just wonder how we reconcile those things so that the comments are actually helpful to us. The danger, I think I'm saying, we get drawn into detail, a detail which is already being dealt with and sorted somewhere, rather than the bigger picture, which I think is where we need to focus if we're going to be useful in that.
Yes, Keith, you're absolutely right on that one. I mean, one of the things the plan will do is to identify already existing plans by others. So under the heading of the environment and green space, regarding the River Slee, we will certainly identify that River Slee project is already underway by a partnership of the District Council and the River Slee Trust and others. So we won't need to go into a lot of detail about that. We can refer people to their website. Similarly, the District Council has a transport strategy for Sleaford, which was drawn up in 2014, has not been hardly implemented at all. But I'm told that it will be revised and a new plan is soon to be drawn up and consulted on. So again, I think we shouldn't need to go into too much detail about these transport issues. We should refer to that other plan and consultation. So we do need to keep all those other things in mind. Thank you. Nick, I believe you wanted to speak again.
It's okay. I'll put it into chat. What I'm thinking about. It's to do with the skills deficit on that issue there that Ken raised.
Yes.
I'll just put something. I've sort of typed something there. It'd be better for you all to look at, because I did not agree at all with that about the skills deficit. But I'll put it into chat. Okay.
Thank you very much. One thing I wanted to say, if there's no more hands up at the moment, about Janet's presentation, two things in particular jumped out to me. One of them was in the area of the leisure and the arts, and two things under that. One was that, of course, during most of our consultation period, which was last year, 2020, and the early part of this year, because of the COVID restrictions, many of the arts and cultural facilities were closed, of course. Our theatre was closed, the hub was closed, the music venues around town were closed. And so those things may not have been uppermost in people's minds when we were consulting. As Janet said, this is not the end of public engagement. We need to continuously be engaging with people and asking for their views right up until the point where we send the draft plan off to the District Council. And so I would propose that over the next few months, while we're working through the further stages of the plan, we continue to ask people for their views, but we particularly ask them about the arts and leisure centres, the arts and leisure services, given that they have been closed over the last year. I think we have an information deficit there really on, you know, which of those things people value, which of them they might like to see more of, in which locations, etc. The cinema has been mentioned, but that's probably because it's the one with a pretty high profile, given that there is already the Heart of Sleaford project, which is, or was, well, it still is actually officially aiming to regenerate the centre of the town and provide a cinema as part of that. It's received a small setback during the COVID pandemic, in that the operator of the cinema, who had been identified through a tendering process, pulled out, said they thought it was no longer viable. And so the district council is, I believe, you know, reviewing that project and looking at actually several different options for running a cinema, which do not necessarily mean leasing it to one of the big operators. We might, as a district council, set up our own cinema company. It's not impossible. Run the whole thing ourselves. So the cinema's had a high profile, that's had a lot of comments, but the other arts and culture hasn't, and I think we need to ask people particularly about that. As I said, that the hub was one of the things that was closed during most of the last period. But the hub, of course, had its own consultation exercise 18 months, 2 years ago, which resulted in the refurbishment, which we've now seen and now opened. So perhaps people didn't comment on the hub so much because it's already had a major consultation and renovation of its own already. But maybe Claire, you have a view on that?
Hi, and yeah, I was just going to comment with regard to the cinema. So we're in conversation with the district council at the moment, looking at a temporary provision for a cinema throughout the summer, and that's hopefully going to lead on to more of a long-term solution. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of flag up that that's being discussed currently. I'd like to think that with regard to the comments coming back, maybe everybody's really happy with the hub now that it's been newly refurbished. We've had a phenomenal first 2 weeks of opening. So yeah, hopefully taking on board all of the local feedback that we did as part of our own consultation has proved fruitful for us.
Well, that's good to hear, Claire. Thank you very much. Yes, as you say, the fact that you've had such a great refurbishment, people may be, and I'm sure they are, really happy with that, and so they haven't commented on it too much in our engagement. But when it comes to writing the plan, of course, I think we will need to refer to the hub as a valuable and existing building in the town for arts and culture and other events, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of support for it continuing to exist, and potentially, you know, improving or enlarging, or I know you now have under your roof all of the arts outreach groups as well. And that's a whole other area that I'm sure the public will become more and more interested in, how much the hub can do outside of its actual building. So we will refer to that in our plan.
Great. Yeah, I know I shared some data previously. There's a lot of research and reports being done lately on towns and villages, and particularly high streets, that are really embracing their local arts and culture and embedding that within their town and village planning as well. And I've shared some recent reports, and more have come out since. So yeah, I think we absolutely have to kind of reference the hub and use this fantastic resource in terms of looking ahead and looking to the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Janet has her hand up. Would you like to speak now, Janet?
Yeah, it was just to say, please don't forget that we had a baseline survey where there was a lot of open questions, and there was definitely reference to arts and culture comments from that baseline survey. Obviously, when we develop new questionnaires, you're always thinking about how many questions you're going to include, and you never want to make anything so long that it puts people off. So it's always really difficult. So again, this is it's another sort of temperature test, I guess, really, and it's building on that. But we certainly had comments, favourable comments on the hub in the baseline survey. There wasn't a specific question this time round. We wanted to try and keep the questionnaire to 25 questions and no more. So that was the reason why.
Okay, thank you very much, Janet. There are no other hands up at the moment for questions or comments on Janet's presentation. So if we're all happy with that, and I think we've had a lot of really useful comments now in this discussion that pulled out a lot of useful information and suggestions to take forward. What we would like to do now is to move straight on with all these ideas fresh in our minds to Steve facilitating a shortish session with us on how do we turn what's come out of that engagement into the bare bones of a vision and objectives, which we can then do further work on with the public. And I don't know how you feel, Steve, but I think a vision is usually a vision statement. It's usually a fairly short, simple vision statement, and that is not an easy thing to kind of write by committee or to write through an on-screen discussion. So maybe now we should focus more on the objectives.
Yeah, I think we can sort of do a mixture of the two. I think we can identify elements of the vision, but then think about how they become objectives. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, shall I?
Would you like to lead us on through that then?
Okay, thank you. And I mean, it's good that I'm pleased to see Janet's hanging on a bit, because normally when we've done these, this part of the neighbourhood plan making process live, then this is effectively the point at which Janet steps back and we step forward a bit, but we have an interesting interchange at this stage, because really the work that's been done through the questionnaire and the analysis of the questionnaire, and I've really enjoyed listening to what Janet said over the last hour, that is the starting point for then thinking about, well, what do you really want to achieve with the neighbourhood plan and through the neighbourhood plan. Because actually preparing the plan is a useful exercise if you get it right. So I think plan making is a good thing for bringing communities together, for getting people to understand other members of the community's different needs, different aspirations, different opinions on things. So it helps to sort of reconcile some differences, find ways forward where there are clearly almost conflicting objectives that need to be made. So because that's done in an open way, again, if you get it right and if the circumstances allow, then making the plan is helpful. The plan itself is sort of the least important part of it, because the next thing that's important is the changes that the plan brings about. And in a way, yeah, you need the plan to do it, and it's a statement in time. But the objective isn't really the plan. The objective, there's a different type of objective. The objective is to affect change or to influence change on the ground. And obviously, change is going to happen whether you have a plan or not. The difference that having a plan makes is that the change hopefully is influenced and it's moved in one direction rather than another, rather than it being entirely down to other forces that don't necessarily come together in an integrated way. So that's why the sort of input that has emerged from the survey is important as an indication of what people are thinking, and the starting point for picking up on those issues and then bringing them into an evolving vision and a clear set of objectives for the things that you do want to achieve through the plan on the ground in the future. And this next step of actually bringing those together is a critical one, but it doesn't all have to happen at one time. So what you do today is very much just a starting point. What will be done on the, if I got the date right, 29th of June, is another important stage, but it doesn't stop there. What I've done, and I'm hoping that I will now be able to share my screen with you. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see my hand and a bit of paper. Whilst Janet's been going through the results of the survey, and then you've been discussing some of your first thoughts about those, I've made some notes. So I've started to put it on this side. The main themes and topics, if you like, that probably ought to be considered as we start to sketch out a vision and objectives. And then at the same time, I did make a few notes on some of the points that you were actually discussing, so that I don't lose track of those as the plan making process continues. And I thought that was there were some very interesting points that are emerging there. As far as the vision is concerned, and I think what Robert said is quite right, that the vision wants to be fairly succinct. The objectives then bring that out in more detail and give you something, hopefully, as far as possible and as often as possible, something that's measurable, that you can say, well, this is our objective, and somebody 5, 10, 15 years down the line can look back at it and say, well, yes, we achieved that, or no, look, that didn't really work. If the process works well, then you're going to have reviews of this on a reasonably regular basis. So the objectives should be part of the ongoing monitoring system for whether the plan is achieving what you want it to achieve and whether you need to make adjustments to it as you go along. So the vision is exactly what it says. It's basically trying to look ahead. And I think, don't get too hung up on a precise date or a precise number of years. It's looking ahead almost as far as you reasonably can in terms of actions that you can start now and hope to see through within a reasonable period of time, to think, well, what by the time this plan's done its stuff, and perhaps the one after it's come in and that's done its bit as well, what do we really want Sleaford to be like? How do we want the town to be in, and I will put some figures in, but in say 20 or 25 years time from now, compared with how it is now? What are the things that we really cherish about Sleaford and don't want to lose at any cost? And what are the things that really don't work very well and we definitely want to change at all costs? And what are the things that are going to influence change and we need to respond to, because they're going to be factors that weigh on our community and its life, and we have a responsibility as plan makers to try and provide for those to improve people's lives rather than detract from them. So the process that Janet took us through, I thought flagged up very neatly a series of topics that really need to be reflected on, generally in the vision and in more detail in the objectives. So there was the issue of community safety, which I thought was an interesting one to start with. And I thought that what came from that was a clear impression that basically Sleaford's a good place to live. People generally do feel safe. Obviously, there's some issues. Obviously, there's some places that do need attention. And obviously, moving forward, you want to make sure that some of the hiccups that are there, some of the intimidating factors aren't repeated. But generally, it seems that people feel comfortable, feel safe in Sleaford. Certainly as far as sort of social safety is concerned, I picked up that there were some concerns perhaps about traffic related safety, and that's another thing that needs to be looked at. So that may be something that you want to comment on in the vision, because I presume it's something that you want to maintain and build on. The second point that the survey looked at was the environment, and I think Janet made the point that there seems to be a lot of support for environmental improvement. So there seems to be an appreciation of a good general environment in the town, a willingness and an aspiration to improve, and I think it went beyond just local physical environments. From what I picked up, there's a sort of general environmental awareness that may drive the approach to some of the other things. Coupled with that, you've obviously got the built heritage of the town, and particularly the town centre, which is obviously something that is valued and is potentially a strong asset. There's issues then to do with movement and transport, and the one associated with that came in at the end, accessibility. So it's got to be movement and transport for everybody, all generations, all abilities and disabilities. And again, that's one of those things where you can expect that over the period that the plan will cover, even the first plan, there may well be some very significant changes on a wider scale, a bigger global and national scale, that need to be considered in thinking about what you want Sleaford to look like 20 years from now, and what your objectives are in the meantime. The discussion about homes and the need for basically providing for the real needs of the population, and ensuring that that's reflected in the complete range and affordability of homes available. The culture, leisure, recreation, arts aspects, they're clearly something that's important to the vision for Sleaford, as I understood it, and you might want to reflect on that in the wording of a statement that emerges from this, and certainly in the objectives. And again, it's one of those things that gives Sleaford an attractive quality of life that you may want to then feel is important to build on explicitly in the setting of the plan. Lots of things to do with the local economy and how changes will be needed and are going to happen, and how they might go in one direction or another, and choices to be made, at least choices in the influences that are brought to bear on that. So they were the key things that you've now got some degree of information about from public opinion, to the extent you can take it from a plan that relies on self-selected responses. And you want to then keep that going as engagement proceeds for the remaining parts of the plan making process. Then sitting alongside that, you've got the things I put down here, which are a series of very significant influences on the town, and to some extent they're perhaps external influences. So they're the things that are going to drive change externally. People's aspirations, people's needs in relation to these locally are going to drive change, but these particular changes are sort of going to be driving change in all towns, in all cities, in all villages, and not only in this country. So clearly there's all the impacts that can be expected from climate change that you need to reflect on. And those impacts are not only the direct impacts of a changing climate, but they're the impacts of the responses to a changing climate. And so when we start looking at relationships between homes and work, between homes, work, and where people spend their leisure time and go shopping, and the way that they move about, then those are going to be, to some extent, influenced, probably to quite a large extent influenced by responses, policy responses, and technological and economic responses to climate change at the global and national and regional level. So there needs to be a reflection on that and understanding of that as you move through the rest of the plan making process. Partly tied in with that, there's the whole issue of economic change, but that's also tied in with technological change. And the lesson of the last 12 to 18 months has been that changes can be very deep and very fast, and they can be they can happen immediately and have a long-term impact, and things that were happening gradually can suddenly get accelerated. And so I think we need to think about that, particularly in the context of the role of the town centre in Sleaford, the role of Sleaford in the county, and the role of the different neighbourhoods and districts in the town, and how they relate both to each other and the town centre. Resulting partly from all those things going ahead there, there's then going to be social changes. And again, the current situation has highlighted a lot of issues to do with social equality concerns and economic concerns. And those are undoubtedly going to impact on policy at all levels and must be considered as you start looking at the vision and the objectives for the town. And sort of putting those all together, you really then come up with an approach to sustainability for the plan that has to take account of how you really create the bridges between all those different influences in a genuinely sustainable way. So that's just an introduction to, as I see it, to the sort of thing that ideally needs to be considered as you start to plan for the future of the place and the communities who share it. And the starting point is really to say, well, okay, in very, very generalised terms, what do we want Sleaford to be like 20 years from now? Or I mean, you can start the other way. You can say, the way things are going, what do we expect Sleaford to be like 20 years from now? And are we happy with that? Or do we want to influence it and intervene to make some changes so that it doesn't do all that? Now, if anybody wants to venture some suggestions, I'll try to note things down, and between us we can perhaps try to build up at least some bullet points or some general comments that can go towards building the vision and the objectives.
Before we open it up to that wider participation, Steve, can I just start? Is everybody happy with the kind of process or scheme that Steve has set out so far on the paper in front of you? Do you agree with his grouping of the subjects and the themes into these kind of areas that he sketched out on the pad? Are we all happy with that? Personally, I am. I just want to make sure that everyone else is as we go forward. You know, I can't see everyone on the screen at the same time at the moment because we're sharing it, but I don't see anyone shaking their head. I can see a few thumbs up here. So I think we're fine to go ahead. Paul is waving. Do you want to make a comment, Paul? Councillor Edward Shea.
I find it interesting the contradictions we have. Like, people are concerned about climate change, but they want more car parks. They want to drive into town. I find that quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that being one of the the hotter debating points as this this goes forward.
One other thing is that in kind of the outer bits of the suburbs of Sleaford, if you like, there's a lot of disinterest in the town totally. So people would they just see it as a place where they have their house. They don't shop in Sleaford. They probably don't actually ever socialize in Sleaford. They drive home. They get home. They watch the TV probably. They drive out to maybe, I don't know, some of the larger shopping centres. And so I don't know how kind of that things would be impact, because I think that would be quite a significant percentage of Sleaford.
Can I just comment on that? I think that's an interesting point, because and that's something that I think has really been highlighted by the lockdown and by the increase in people working from home and everything that goes with it. And I'm not saying anything new here. I'm just sort of repeating things that are being said certainly in planning circles all over the place. There needs to be a reconsideration of the neighbourhoods in which people spend most of their time, alongside consideration of the future of town centres, and to some extent they have to work in balance with each other. But I think generally in a lot of cities and towns, there's a feeling that, well, people have started to discover, either afresh or for the first time, some of the strengths and weaknesses of the particular places that they live in, and there may be a move towards building stronger neighbourhoods within each larger settlement. And so that again is something that perhaps you might want to think about.
Yes, thank you very much, Steve. I agree with Paul to the extent that a very large number of people in the town are probably pretty disconnected with the social and civic life of the town. I think we saw that in the recent local authority elections, where only 3 out of 10 people actually voted. However, we can only work with the material that we have. So the material we've gathered so far, that through the engagement activities that Janet has outlined, has brought us to the point where we are today, which Steve is neatly summarising on his sheets now. But I think that it's important to bear in mind what Janet said earlier, that engagement doesn't end here. And so I would like to suggest that at our next meeting, we have an item on engagement and how we can continue to engage people through the process over the next few months, even as we move forward on developing the vision and objectives and the other things we have to do, whether there are some other things we can do, like having a market stall back again now that those things are permissible, to engage with the public and try and get more of those people that Paul has mentioned actually involved. Does anybody, yes, their hands have gone up. I think David Marriage was first, and then Keith, then Ken, then David Suter.
Right, just taking Steve's point on the community aspect. If you look at Milton Keynes, and you could argue Sleaford is a very mini Milton Keynes, it has the town centre and then these estates growing up. Some parts of Milton Keynes work well, where there's maybe a shop or something like that, because that creates almost a community. The nearest we've got in Handley Chase, in Sleaford, is Handley Chase, where they've built the co-op. And they force the developers, I guess, by you can't build any houses until you've built a co-op first. That's a lot of people go down there, and that is creating a community hub. There are other areas of Sleaford which have been developed. Greyleys is a shocking example, but there's going to be newer ones coming up before long. And that just might be something to put into the neighbourhood plan, that there must be some attempt to create by having, I call it a village shop, if I can call it that in inverted commas, something where the community could coalesce together, not having to go out of their community or their little area into the centre of town, or find something where they have to drive 2 or 3 miles to get to.
Yes, thank you, David, for that comment. Keith was next.
Thank you. I'll just say, David, and say that we must always take account of the community people aspect, which I think is where my heart is more than anything else. Of all these things, it is just about the infrastructure, everything else. It's about how people behave and occupy those spaces, as just what the spaces themselves are. I have a question listening to everything that's been gone, I think is quite important for the vision, and that is, are we looking for one plan that fits all? Is there diversity within the plan? And if there is diversity, how do you incorporate that with a vision? Because I think that's one of the difficult things to achieve. It's easy to write a vision that's just for me, to write a vision that's for everybody else and takes account of all their differing things. And just been talking about one's very specific in terms of how climate change and car parking go together. How do we incorporate that diversity into a clear vision? I think the danger is the vision is dissipated if it's not really clear. But at the same time, everybody's got to feel up to it. And I think that's a great challenge. I'm not sure anybody's really cracked it, but it's really important that we take proper consideration. Thank you.
Yes, on that point, Keith, I think what we will do from today is get Steve to do a bit more work on the vision and objectives from the input he's had from the working group, and then return to this at the next meeting, because as Steve said, I think this needs to be a process where we keep returning to it and refining it and improving it in the light of further knowledge. And when we bring our draft vision to the next meeting, we will also circulate some examples from other neighbourhood plans, so that we can compare ours with others, and as you say, try and ensure that ours is as all embracing as possible, as embracing as it needs to be for our town. Ken, you wish to comment also?
Yeah, 2 things I wrote down. Greyleys originally had a church and things that would have had a shop and everything else put in, but it was vetoed by the developers, who said they couldn't progress it. So that's why you haven't got that. A large area of Greyleys is now being removed. All the trees, 100 trees were removed, so that people could have extended gardens, which of course means that all that rainwater in the storm water is now quite happily traveling down the River Slee, which is now giving us the flooding requirement needs for the River Slee. That also goes for Castle. They built up the floodplain there, and all the water from that floodplain and what's the name, where they built the houses, has pipes that go directly to the River Slee. So we got all that water going down there. The other thing, I did put a picture up on the side one saying about the environmental sea rises we are expected. It actually says 20 meters, but actually it should say 9 meters. for that one. So we could be looking at 29 years. We could be looking at Sleaford being a seaside town, because fresh water floats on seawater. So when we have storm water, you have to add it to the sea, to the base sea level. What's the name? Yeah, basically the sea level. We got a nice little pond by the area of Northgate Stephen. That is the level of our water table. That's why that is there. And so we have to also progress that part of the plan, because remember, seawater always, any water always finds its own level. Therefore, it'll come up the aquifer, it'll come up the ground. So that has to also be taken into propositions at a later, maybe now or later date. But we'll have to start looking at that sooner or later. And I mean by government, because I don't think the councils or anything else can do much about this, because it's the defense of the sea, defense of the coastal waters. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Ken. A good point. Some of the issues that may be affecting the town in the long term are pretty much out of our hands, and they're under the control of central government departments and agencies, and we will have to note that in our plan itself. David Souter, you were next to speak.
Yes, the apparent contradictions between people supporting a climate change agenda and wanting car parks in the centre. I have come across people who, for example, are disabled or elderly, who can't walk very far, are particularly interested in town centre car parking. Also, I've come across people, particularly in the outskirts of Sleaford, who will drive to the likes of Riskington and Woodhorse Spa because there's free car parking there, and equally will go to the pool of other towns, if partly based on car parking charges in Sleaford. So I'm a little concerned that if we don't have the town car parking, that people who are particularly on the periphery may well go elsewhere, and in a contradictory way to what is good for the environment. So I do think we need to explore those two answers and why they contradict, and make sure that we do get something that's good for the environment, not something that's assumed to be. You know, we need to work out why people will behave in certain ways, of words. And so what may not be, on the face of it, look a good policy on the climate change agenda may well be the best for the climate change agenda. Okay, I'm not 100% certain if I made the point fully, but right. I think you probably understand what I'm getting at this point.
Yes, thank you, David. I think we need to get back to the central point that we were trying to achieve here, which is Steve taking us some steps forward on getting some objectives down on paper and some elements of a vision down on paper. So thanks for all those general comments. But Steve, do you want to return to your sheet now and try and take us a step forward?
Yeah, just sort of looking, as I say, we can flip about a bit, but looking at the objectives, then it's, I think that one of with transport, getting a balance between environment and economy is clearly going to be a challenge, but one that needs to be addressed. So you need some clear objective on that. I think there was a point that was made about a need for any new developments to have the community infrastructure, including local shops, local schools, churches, all the other stuff, to have that genuinely provided for and guaranteed as part of the development process. And again, that I think is something that you'd want an objective relating to. So I think perhaps we can add some more objectives over this side of the page as other things come up. Regarding the regarding the issue that was raised about sort of skills and training, and I know that that's sort of getting towards the edge of what an neighbourhood plan can do, but there are things that impact on the neighbourhood plan. Has anybody got any sort of feelings about what could be done in the town to equip it better for some of the changes in skills requirements that might be anticipated in the coming years? Clearly, we seem to be going towards a situation where there's a greater emphasis on technological skills, on creativity, on the arts relating to the economy in a much stronger way. Are there things there that you feel should be reflected on in either the vision or the objectives?
Yeah, I've got one. When it comes to training, which I think is really what you're saying, what can we do with the new skills? Just need to take your time back to when Grantham College had the hairdressing training place, exactly where the town hall is now. The result from that was everybody kept local, and I think at one stage there were 37 hairdressers in Sleaford, because the young ladies, young men went there, learned hairdressing, then set up in the town. It's just something to consider, that maybe they need a training hub. I'm not suggesting the town hall gives the building back to anybody, but basically somewhere in the town whereby either directly or by local online, they can do some of the training of the skills, maybe of the slightly lower levels, as opposed to sort of going for high level degree or anything. Keep almost sort of artisan type levels, because that would keep people in the town. For example, bricklaying, woodwork and stuff like that. There's always a shortage in the town of people getting people to do things, yet there's no training. Apart from the occasional apprentice scheme, there's no training in the town at all.
Thank you, David. So I see Claire is noting in the chat about plans for the hub to offer more training and development facilities down the line. It seems to me that one aspect of skills and obtaining skills is having a college or training facility in the town. Another way of approaching it, of course, is improving accessibility from the town to the colleges in the other towns around us. So, you know, is there good public transport to Grantham, Lincoln or Boston? And is it affordable for students so that they can easily and affordably get to other places to get the training that they need? Maybe that is something we should look into as well.
And I think in doing that, and I see you've got a few people wanting to comment, so if I can just interject with a thought about where you might want to go with this. It seems to me that partly a result of some of the changes that were gradually taking place anyway, and partly as a result of the sudden impact of the COVID situation and everything that's gone with it. Places like Sleaford, and by that I mean smaller towns that haven't necessarily been at the centre of economic activity. Places like this may have a different role in the future and a different level of attraction in the future from that which they've traditionally, conventionally had over the last 50 years or so. And so it may well be that as people choose to work 3 days from home and one day, perhaps 2 days in an office somewhere else, then the quality of life in a place like Sleaford may be a real attraction to people who, for their office bit of their working life, go somewhere miles away. And I know that's happened with commuting generally, but this is a different approach, because these are people who would then be spending a lot of time and investing a lot of their lives in the town and choosing to do so. So there may be some differences there, and that might need to be reflected in the way that you sort of structure or start to intervene in the structure of the place for the future. And just to draw an extreme example, when we finish this, I'm staying in my dining room, but I'm going to Barbados, because we've now got a discussion there about what they refer to as digital nomads, and small island states that are very remote are very much getting into the idea that, well, actually, people can stay here. They can be here for either most of their lives or for large chunks of their lives. And if we get the digital side of it right, if we really make sure that we have linked in properly with global communications, we can offer a great quality of life to people who are working in the big cities in the so-called developed parts of the world on a different relationship, different scale. That might be something that a place like Sleaford can do in relation to places like Birmingham and London and Leeds. So again, that might be something you just want to sort of have in your minds as you start to think this forward.
Thank you, Steve. People are waiting to speak, but I'm aware of the time. We're now at 4 o'clock, and I think just starting to go over 4 o'clock, which was the scheduled end of the meeting. Nicola, do you have to leave at this point? Or maybe Nicola has already left.
No, you're muted, Nicola.
Sorry, there was a lot of noise in the hub, Claire. It's all the school kids, actually. There's hordes of them out there. What are you doing? I'll shut the window. Yeah, ideally, because Lisa's on leave next week. Sorry, I was saying this, and we've not caught up. And we are supposed to finish at 4 on a Friday, but that's yet to happen.
Right, okay, and I'm getting messages that other people need to leave as well. So let's have the last couple of speakers, and then we'll wrap this meeting up. We can ditch the rest of the agenda. It was only reporting back on the basic items like publicity and finance. And we can do all that at the next meeting on the 25th of June. So let's have a couple more speakers on this subject. Then we will ask Steve to go away and take all that we've said to him today and start working on a draft vision and objectives for us. And as I said, we will bring that back to the next meeting and continue this discussion. So to wrap up for today, Janet has been waiting a long time with her hand up. So if we could have Janet speaking first and then Keith.
It's just a couple of things, really. Firstly, around visioning. I think quite a good technique when you're looking at a vision is just to sometimes come up with a few key words of how you would want somewhere to be and build from there. And I was just sat here because Sleaford is my local town, and I wrote down things like accessible for all, visually appealing, safe, embracing diversity, vibrancy, pride. They're just words, but you know, there may be words that you can start to use. I think, you know, I am quite proud of Sleaford, and I always defend it because I think it's a lovely little town. Yes, there's things we want to improve. And a vision is that, isn't it? It's something that you aspire to. So I think maybe when you talk next time, it would be good to get some key words from people to help develop that overall vision. Because I think although we were talking about it a little bit, we were sort of perhaps sidetracking slightly. And just my second point around training. Please don't forget what the schools now offer. BTEC, bricklaying, woodwork, childcare, all sorts of courses that certainly weren't even in place when my daughters, who are now in their 30s, were at the schools in Sleaford. And also, don't forget about online learning. It's becoming more and more accessible. Free courses, you know, it's about how we can encourage people to gain skills. And we want our community to be skilled, because if they're skilled, hopefully they're earning better money, so it improves their quality of life, and hopefully they can then spend it locally. So please don't forget that. I don't think we need to talk too much about having personally a technical college in Sleaford. I think the schools are doing a great job, and you know, there's also the apprenticeships and everything that are coming on board. That's it from me.
Thank you, Janet. And last word, Keith.
Just picking up on that, I think in terms of plan, picking up the points that Janet was making about just as a phrase, I think we can aim to create a learning hub in Sleaford and leave it at that. I think anything else gets into the realm of the solution, not the aspiration. And whether we're in school, whether we learn digitally, whether we learn in another forum that's been, you know, put up for that person, whatever it is, we're creating an ongoing learning which will actually evolve and move as the town evolves and moves. But it's creating that aspiration and that purpose that says we want to be a town that's constantly learning about itself, learning about others, and so on. And I think picking up Dave Zuter's point earlier on about people wanting to move into travel into town now, again, we are looking at a vision for 20 to 25 years, and some of those issues about people wanting to go and park in town now will not be an issue in 25 years because something else will have happened. People will do in life differently. And I think that's a big challenge for us. It's not just about the here and now, it is about being able to expand ourselves, not just in, if you like, variety of people, but over the longevity of time. And that's the other side of the challenge, I think. But it's a big challenge that we try and meet. And it is about being very much into the future rather than trying to solve today's problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. I think that was a neat summary, a neat way to end the discussion. It's not just about today; it's about the future and what the future needs. So we have to wrap it up now because we've gone over our time, and I know other people have other things that they need to go on to. So we will circulate the note of the meeting as usual, and we will continue on this theme in the next meeting and work towards developing the vision and objectives that we need. In between now and the next meeting, we'll circulate a few other papers on other things that are also being developed, such as the walking tours with the public, and as I mentioned to Nick earlier, hopefully walking tours with school students, and a workshop also with the public to get more input from them. So all that is to come. Watch out for those things on the email. Thank you for participating today. It's been a great session, lots of ideas and information that will really help us move forward on the next step. So goodbye for now. Have a good weekend. Have a good long weekend, good bank holiday, and enjoy that. See you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.